For many, attending university is the next big step in one's life. Following their high school graduation, they prepare to start a new chapter and enter into an entirely new world filled with new friends, new memories, and new possibilities. But some are not so lucky. In today's episode, we'll be exploring two chilling university campus mysteries. But first, I'd like to thank Magellan TV for sponsoring today's episode. If you're a returning Cold Case Detective viewer, you've probably heard us rave about our connections with Magellan TV, the premier streaming service for the most in-depth content regarding true crime and many other genres. You've been told about their exclusive documentaries and engrossing television shows, and how they evolve the way you watch true crime by pairing their titles with other fascinating subjects, such as time travel or the occult or medical mysteries. No matter your interests, you'll always have something to watch, and you'll always have something to learn. To give you an inside scoop on what type of content awaits you within the Magellan TV library, we want to highlight one of our favorite titles we watched recently. This week, we're highlighting the real-world historical documentary called Lifeline, Pearl Harbor's Unknown Hero, a feature-length film that highlights a wartime hero we can guarantee you've never heard of, whose feats went undiscovered after the Pearl Harbor attack during World War II. While it's not true crime per se, it gives a human being who went to great lengths to save lives the story they deserve, and it's such a refreshing narrative in a day and age where death and violence receive all of the headlines. That's one of our favorite aspects of this documentary, how it takes a story we all know from history class and gives it a unique spin that makes us appreciate our own lives as we live them today. It's the perfect mixture of historical education and compassionate storytelling, two things we aim to do here on Cold Case Detective. Lifeline, Pearl Harbor's Unknown Hero is also a new release, part of Magellan TV's 15 to 20 hours of brand new content they add every week. Viewers can also take advantage of a special holiday offer. Buy one, get one free gift card for an annual membership by clicking on the link in the description below. So why wait? Use the link below to get access to a free month trial and jump into the awe-inspiring documentary of Lifeline, Pearl Harbor's Unknown Hero, and other top-notch programs. You'll be very glad you did. And now let's dive in with today's mysteries. Michael Negrete. Born on March 25th, 1981, to Mary and Miguel Negrete, Michael William Negrete was the oldest child of three boys and was known to be extremely intelligent and talented. Loved ones talk fondly of Michael's loud and sudden laugh, his habit of saying "doop" when he was pleased, and the way he always sang jazz songs to himself. A trumpet and steel drum player, the teenager was part of a band named Island Fever at the time of his disappearance. In December of 1999, 18-year-old Michael was a well-performing student who was attending the University of California, Los Angeles on a music scholarship. He lived on the 6th floor of the Dykstra Hall dormitory, located near the intersection of Gailey Avenue and Strathmore Boulevard. Popular and passionate, Michael's experience at university had, so far, been ordinary. On the evening of December 9th, he attended a party with friends. Afterwards, he returned to his room and played a video game on his computer with a university friend via an internet connection. It was around 4 o'clock on the morning of December 10th that the pair finally stopped playing. Michael went to see his friend to congratulate him on winning, and the pair went their separate ways, with the trumpet player last seen returning to his room. However, the following morning, at 9 a.m., Michael's roommate woke to find that he was gone. Authorities believe that the 18-year-old left the dorm sometime between 4 a.m. and 9 a.m. He left behind all of his personal belongings, including clothing, shoes, his wallet, and his musical instruments, and was never seen or heard from again. Earlier on the evening of December 9th, he had emailed his mother, telling her he'd be home on the 15th. He then asked her to call or email him. This was the last time he contacted either of his parents. Initially, Michael's friends and family had a hard time getting law enforcement interested, as the police believed it was likely the young man had just wandered off on his own for a while. A few days passed before the investigation truly began. When it did, scent dogs were used. They traced Michael to Sunset Boulevard and Bellagio Street in Los Angeles, just 15 minutes away from the dorm, and according to several articles that reported on the case, there was a bus stop here where the scent ended. However, the LA Times reported that the investigators claimed the dogs had gotten confused and that their trail could not be trusted. It is unclear what exactly happened here or how the dogs lost direction. Then authorities created a composite image of a man seen inside the dormitory at around 4:35 a.m. on the morning of Michael's disappearance. The sketch was released in 2000, and investigators announced they wished to speak with this individual, whom they believed was a possible witness. They are uncertain if he's connected to the case or if he saw anything at all, but still wish to speak to him so he can be eliminated from their inquiries. He is described as being a 35-year-old white man who stood between 5'7" and 5'8" and had a heavy-set build. He wore a shiny grey jacket with a turquoise-coloured design. He is yet to be identified and has never come forward to the police. One witness, a student who saw the man, claimed that he covered his face with a newspaper when he realized he was being watched. No one could account for this person. No one knew who he was or where he had come from. Additionally, another student claimed to have seen someone matching Michael's description leaving the dorm at around 4:35 a.m. However, this sighting has never been substantiated. There was no CCTV around the area, making it impossible for law enforcement to check out this lead for themselves. Michael did not have a vehicle at university, meaning that if he had traveled anywhere, he had to have gone by foot or public transport. During the investigation, neither authorities nor the 18-year-old's family could find any reason that he'd leave of his own volition. He was not linked to drugs or alcohol abuse. He did not have any real enemies, and he did not appear to be living any kind of secret life. This left investigators stumped, wondering how a young man could simply walk out of his dorm and disappear off the face of the earth. After this, there were very few leads in the case. During the initial investigation, over 500 tips were submitted to authorities, who followed each and every one. They checked garbage chutes and construction sites on campus, but they are still no closer to finding Michael or finding out what happened to him. Another tip that was investigated was called in by a UCLA student who lived off campus. The student heard several people on the telephone talking about Michael. They said he had left California, and they spoke about him being a UCLA student named Mike. However, this lead appears to have gone nowhere. There are very few theories in Michael's case. In 2013, one of his brothers, Steve, wrote in a blog post that the 18-year-old's friends had told him that he'd been attending raves and experimenting with drugs, particularly ecstasy, in the weeks or months before he vanished. Steve theorized that Michael wandered off that night after taking something and wound up being abducted or running into someone with bad intentions. The only other theory in the case isn't truly a theory at all. A website which appears to be dedicated to clearing the name of David Allen Westerfield, who was convicted of murdering a young girl named Danielle Van Dam in 2002 and was additionally convicted for the possession of child pornography, has said that the father of Danielle, Damon Van Dam, is responsible. He resembles the composite sketch for the man loitering in the dorms on the morning of December 10th, 1999. According to Van Dam himself, he is friends with Miguel, Michael's father, and was in LA at the time of the 18-year-old's disappearance. However, this is a non-theory, as no evidence actually ties Van Dam to the disappearance, and there is nothing to explain what his motivations might be. Meanwhile, Westerfield was connected to Danielle's murder via DNA and other physical evidence. The website seems to exist solely to smear Van Dam's name and reputation. In the years following the 18-year-old's disappearance, his parents hired 2 different private investigators, but to no avail. They also offered a $100,000 reward for information that would lead them to answers, but this also went unclaimed. The band Michael played in, Island Fever, held several fundraisers for the search. In 2001, officers working the case contacted a homicide profiler who told them it was most likely that they had already spoken with someone who knew what had happened to Michael that night. But 2 decades later, they are no further forward in solving the case. Mary has said of her son's disappearance, All we want is to know what happened. People keep saying that with time there will be healing, but it just gets worse. 18-year-old Michael was last seen alive at around 4 a.m. on the morning of December 10th, 1999, after playing a video game with a friend on the 6th floor of the Dykstra Hall dormitory at the University of California, LA. The dorm is located near the intersection of Gailey Avenue and Strathmore Boulevard. Michael is a white male, standing at 5'8" with brown hair and brown eyes, and was 130 pounds when last seen. He is described as having well-developed bicep and neck muscles. At the time of his disappearance, he had a crew cut and wore khaki shorts, a blue plaid shirt, and white shoes. He may go by the nickname Mike. If Michael is still alive, he will be 40 years old. If you have any information about his disappearance, you can contact the UCLA Police Department on 310-825-1491. Or alternatively, you can call the LA County Sheriff's Office on 323-890-5500. Christine Rothschild. Born on November 14, 1949, in Chicago, Illinois, Christine Rothschild had a very ordinary upbringing. A clever and hard-working child, she graduated from Senn High School in Chicago and decided to attend the University of Wisconsin in 1968. Christine was fond of nature and enjoyed frequently taking long walks. On the morning of May 26, 1968, 18-year-old Christine awoke at 4 a.m. and wandered down the dimly lit hall of Anne Emery Dormitory, where she almost physically collided with the night hostess, who was the last person to see her alive. Christine nipped to the toilet before returning to her room. She was up at the crack of dawn a few hours later, which was not out of the ordinary for the young woman, as she preferred to take her walks first thing in the morning. Just hours later, however, Christine's body was found by a campus maintenance worker. She was located in a clump of bushes near a classroom building, about half a mile from her dorm. Law enforcement was hastily called to the scene, and an investigation into Christine's violent end began. The 18-year-old was dressed in a blue plaid mini dress, black boots, and a beige 3/4 length jacket. Although she was not sexually assaulted, her clothing was described as being askew, and it was torn in several places. She had scratches on her legs above her boots, as if she'd run through the bushes to flee from an attacker. Christine had been stabbed 14 times with a surgical knife, in the throat and chest, and she had been strangled with a piece of fabric that had been fashioned from the lining of her trench coat. Her jaw was broken, and her own gloves had been shoved down her throat. The force of the stabbings had resulted in her sustaining 4 broken ribs. A bloody men's handkerchief was found underneath her head. Immediately, investigators ruled out the idea that this was a robbery gone wrong. Christine had only been carrying her dorm key and her cigarettes, and the expensive-looking rings she wore had been left on her fingers. The initial investigation was thorough, but fruitless. Detective Charles Lulling, who worked with the Madison Police Department, claimed that they interviewed over 1,500 people, and he believed Christine was the victim of a sadist who picked her out at random. Another theory proposed by authorities at the time is that the 18-year-old was part of the Mad City Murders, or Capital City Killings, where 7 women in Madison were murdered between 1968 and 1984. This theory appears to have been dismissed, however, particularly in more recent years. In July of 1968, investigators released a composite sketch of a man with whom they wished to speak in connection with the case. He is described as being 5'9", weighing 160 pounds, and between the ages of 25 and 30. However, this man never came forward and has never been identified. Law enforcement offered a $5,000 reward for information leading to a conviction, but nothing useful came from this. Just one day following Christine's murder, her best friend, Linda Shulko, was alerted to the crime when she was contacted by the police. Chillingly, Linda told them that in the days leading up to the crime, the 18-year-old had complained that she felt like someone was always watching her, and that she felt she was being stalked. Christine had taken her complaints to campus security, who told her that if she needed help, she could call them, and to carry a whistle with her just in case. A 2017 article by The Sun noted that the young woman's room had even once been broken into, although nothing was taken. Christine told Linda that her stalker's name was Niels Jorgensen, a medical research assistant who was often in the memorial reading room when she was, and whom she went out of her way to avoid. She often kept her doors and windows locked, feeling uncomfortable in his presence. She apparently even received a few odd phone calls from him. Linda continued to search for answers following her best friend's murder, and later stated her belief that Jorgensen was responsible for the crime. However, he is now dead. She kept tabs on Jorgensen for some time throughout his life, and even managed to get authorities to investigate him as a suspect. However, a lack of resources meant that they were ultimately unable to track him down. Additionally, some of the evidence in Christine's case has been lost, making DNA testing impossible. A writer named Mike Arntfield proposed the theory that Jorgensen had possibly struck before. He suggested that Jorgensen went between universities, always pretending to be a medical research assistant and targeting new students. According to The Sun, he left town following the murder, and also reportedly refused to take a polygraph test. Jorgensen would have had access to scalpels given his studies, and one fellow researcher claimed to have seen him at the hospital cleaning a scalpel in a way that would remove all DNA and prints. Although his name is not brought up in older articles, authorities mentioned to the media at the time of the murder that their two prime suspects went out of state, suggesting the possibility that Jorgensen was considered a suspect at this point in time. In 2009, however, law enforcement announced that William Zamastil was now a person of interest in the case. Zamastil was sentenced in 2004 to 25 years for the murders of siblings Jacqueline and Malcolm Bradshaw, 18 and 17 years old, respectively. He picked up the pair as they hitchhiked from Las Vegas in February of 1978. Zamastil was already serving a life sentence in 2004 for the rape and murder of a young woman in Wisconsin in 1973. In 1968, he would have been 16 years old. His MO in his later crimes does not line up with the attack on Christine, and Linda remains unconvinced that he had any part in the crime. It is unclear if Zamastil is still considered a person of interest in the case. As previously mentioned, Jorgensen is now dead, and several items of evidence have been lost, meaning that Christine's case may never be solved. She was buried in Irving Park Cemetery in Chicago following her death. And there you have the facts. Please leave a comment down below with your own theories and speculations, and remember to like this video and subscribe to support the channel. You can also support us on Patreon for as little as $2 each month. Thank you for watching. Stay alert, stay safe, and I'll see you next time.